Welcome to episode 201 of the Shared Security Show. And joining me for part 3 of our series on how to break into a cybersecurity career is co-host Scott Wright.
We're breaking in an ethical way, right?
That's right. Only ethical ways do we break into cybersecurity. Yes. Here on the show.
Excellent. Yeah. So thanks for having me, Tom. I've always been a fan of the show.
I know. And we never talk.
We never talk.
So for those of you that don't know, last year, I started doing this series on how to break into a cybersecurity career. And we've had Kevin Johnson, I've had Rafalos on, and now I wanted to talk to Scott about how he got started in, back then it was information security.
InfoSec,
right?
Yes.
InfoSec, and we're maybe dating ourselves a little bit here. But I thought it'd be great just to talk to Scott about how he got started, how his career is kind of developed, and for those of you listening that maybe are looking to get into cybersecurity, maybe you can take some advice from Scott. I'm sure he's got lots of wisdom over the years of things he's learned, or maybe even talking to others that maybe you've mentored or helped get into InfoSec. That might be kind of cool to talk about.
Should be fun. It helps to be the only person that knows InfoSec in the country. No, I'm just kidding. We're not that small a country.
How old are you, Scott?
We have a lot of InfoSec people. How old am I? Well, let's make a contest out of that.
Hey, there we go. So Scott, tell me a little bit about how you got into this field.
Yeah, it's sort of a not direct path, being that I am as aged as I appear. Actually, somebody said I look younger than I am, but in any case, it took a little circuitous route. I was here in Canada. I'm in Ottawa, which happens to be capital city of Canada. It's the federal government. A lot of their departments are here, and so when I did my engineering degree in electrical engineering back in the mid '80s, before Tom was born, and
this is true.
And then I came out and did some software programming and decided, you know what, I'd like to get a management degree. I'd like to know how to manage people rather than just get. I worked in a company where I saw people getting promoted and then weren't happy, they weren't good at it. I thought, I don't want that to happen to me. So I went back to school and got a master's in business admin from the University of Ottawa here. And so that was in 1990. And from then on, I was working for the next 7 years or so in just an aerospace company doing project management, program management, things like that, with software projects. And I just decided I wanted to change. So I applied and I got a job at a security software company called Entrust. And I was a product manager. So it's a nice position because you get to see all parts of the organization. You can see, contracts, you can see sales, you can see support, and, development. So did that for about 4 years, and being in a security software company really helped because it just rubs off on you. Like there's so many aspects of security that just become second nature, as you're working with all these people, really good people. And also it turned out that, that particular, type of software was very popular in the federal government. So they were desperate for expertise in that area. So I ended up, when I left, doing security consulting, a lot of it for the federal government, based on what I had been doing as a product manager. And a lot of it, was beyond what I had really done hands-on. And so I learned quickly about, system security engineering, doing reviews of large IT projects for risk assessments, and, all of the different aspects of security, network level, application level. And the one thing that I thought, I tell this story a lot, but basically over those 10 years or so of consulting, the first 10 years, I learned that we spend a lot of money and we do really well on securing the networks and the applications and the devices. And when we do a risk assessment, there's always, a list of unresolved risks, and always the top of the risks was human vulnerabilities. And so I got really interested in that. And around that time is when I started blogging, just saying, I'd like to, collaborate with people and share what I've learned and things like that. So I started the Security Views blog back in
I remember.
2007 or so.
I remember
And
that.
that's when Tom and I kind of met with in the Security Catalyst forums. And we decided, hey, well, wouldn't it be cool to have a podcast on social media security? So that was kind of, as I was doing consulting for the government and starting to do more projects for private sector, started doing blogging. And I think that really helped with sort of solidifying my confidence in my own knowledge of security. Because if you blog once a week on a topic, then it helps you formulate, your thoughts and your philosophies and those things. So I really started to focus on security management and security awareness as the things that I felt really kind of interested in.
Yeah, that was the Streetwise Security Zone.
Yes, I had a website called the Streetwise Security Zone. I had this sort of delusional idea that all these security professionals would love to collaborate and help each other. And they're all helpful and collaborative people, but nobody wants to talk about their security vulnerabilities or their challenges.
No.
Why? Yeah, so I learned that. And so I went back to focusing on security consulting, but with a real focus on security awareness. So I started doing projects for both public and private sector organizations, really just putting together little websites internally for their intranet that they could point people at, and they would go through, some training content, some quizzes, and it was, pretty well received. But at the time, I could see that people really weren't that interested. They weren't absorbing the content. And so it was, a challenging thing. And so I started to try and focus more and more on doing it in innovative ways. And you might remember the Honey Stick project, which was something I started doing actually around the time I started blogging. I would drop USB drives in public locations. And the only thing on them was some HTML files. There was no active code or anything that could damage anything. But it was really just a demonstration of what people will do with a device they find without thinking about the risks. So as soon as they plug it in and open up a file, I could see which file it was they opened, which device it was they opened. I knew where I dropped it. So it just made for really interesting conversation starters and icebreakers within the training courses that I was doing. I would do some live and do conference presentations and things. So that kind of stuff just sort of helps help me understand, you need to do some innovative things, get some interesting things happening in order for people to really start to pay attention when you're trying to teach things like security awareness.
Yeah. So maybe talk a little bit about kind of what got you or what inspired you to kind of do your own thing, right? You said you had worked for, a software company and,
yeah.
And, what was the kind of the jump that you made to get into consulting?
Yeah, it goes way back actually. I mean, before I worked at Entrust, I would be going to training courses somewhere and say, these guys really know what they're doing, and you know what, they're making a lot of money doing it. So, they're filling a hotel conference room with 50 people, and each of them paid $2,000 for 2 days of training. And I'm going, I wonder what their overhead costs are for this. So I sort of had this vision all along of becoming a trainer in something. I said I have to have some specialty, something I can do well. And I thought about that for years. And when I had been working as a product manager at Entrust, I just started to think, well, one of the courses I had taken and felt this about was product management, but there's so many people doing product management, I couldn't really be an expert at that and excel there. But the security area that we were using, or that we were, providing services and products for, really just interested me, and it just felt natural to become more of an expert in different parts of security. And I kind of like to go where not everybody is competing, and so, I guess if I was going to do it over again, I might have spent more time doing penetration tests because there's probably a bigger opportunity for that. There always has been, pretty high demand. But I wanted to solve the hard problem, which was, the one where getting people to pay attention and everybody in the organization to contribute to security is a challenge. And so I sort of took that on as something I wanted to be more of an expert at. And so that's where I did more blogging, more teaching, more conferences.
Nice. What does it mean to go off the grid? Well, for most of us that are constantly relying on our phones, tablets, and laptops, it means shutting them off and doing some other activity like enjoying nature or spending time with friends and family. Now, you're probably a lot like me and struggle with turning off or putting down that smartphone because we always feel the need to be constantly connected. Listen, it's hard to go off the grid, but the good news is that there are products that can help. So that's why I recommend using a silent Faraday bag, which can instantly block all wireless signals, quickly taking you off the grid and giving you back control of your wireless devices. Check out their full product line at slnt.com. And because you listen to this podcast, make sure you use discount code SHAREDSECURITY at checkout to receive 10% off your order.
You want your organization to be secure and compliant and to have a healthy culture, but your employees' lack of awareness makes you vulnerable to data theft, fraud, and compliance penalties. It's frustrating that the boring, static training content that's being used today has failed to improve employees' ability to defend against cyber attacks. At ClickArmor, we know that without using gamification, it's extremely hard to get staff to understand how to avoid threats. Our gamified simulations and challenges have provided a 50% average improvement in thousands of employees' ability to spot phishing threats. Go to clickarmor.ca/sharedsecurity to get your free gamified phishing assessment for up to 500 employees. You'll see quickly how gamified simulations can help your team be more resilient and compliant and help avoid costly ransomware and fraud incidents. Let ClickArmor help you go from being an underappreciated, stressed out fall guy to being an innovative leader who's the catalyst for greater productivity in your organization.
So how did the transition into from consulting and doing your own thing, and how did that lead to you starting ClickArmor? So what was that kind of that journey like?
It started when I was doing those training courses, the projects where I was doing live training. I was doing some computer-based training that was using basic standard learning management system software, showing people static content or videos and then getting them to do a quiz. And as I said, people just don't necessarily resonate. They certainly don't remember it, a week after they've taken it. I remember one executive I talked to that was not one of the companies I trained, but they said, they were so frustrated that their people would go through training and then the next day would plug in a USB drive they picked up in the parking lot and infect a system. It was like unbelievable. So I'm going, well, there's going to be a need for this, right? So, as I had been asked a few times about gamification in training, and I typically use it. I think I created my first Jeopardy game in just pure HTML because I was not that good a coder. I didn't really know any of the new web languages. I was an old Pascal, Fortran, C programmer.
Yes.
So, I could do basic HTML and a bit of JavaScript. So I did a nice Jeopardy game. I used that in some live training. But I also had used things like Poll Everywhere, which is just a live polling thing. And they have a competition setting in it. So you can do a live presentation, have a little competition that, the winner gets, confetti or something on the screen on the leaderboard. So it was fun. But I started to realize as I investigated more about gamification that there's really, something magical about the properties of gamification that have never been applied in this area. And it's a perfect fit. So I just sort of started envisioning a platform that we could build that would address, the engagement issue, which is the primary one. If you can't get people to pay attention to the training, they're not going to learn anything in the first place. But beyond that, how do you get them to repeat, or practice, or, have an open mind about anything that they see and say, I remember that from the training, right? That takes even more kind of special design. And gamification has such a great set of attributes that sort of perfectly complement the needs that awareness training has. So I decided to build this platform called ClickArmor and hired a part-time, he was a college student, just hired him to do a prototype, in Unity 3D. So we were using a gaming engine to build a little 3D landscape where you'd walk around and you'd try and log into a computer and it would ask you 3 questions and about passwords and things like that. And so I showed that to a few people and they really thought, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I could see this being something really different for awareness training if you can get that kind of thing into an online platform. In the end, we didn't need to do it in 3D. We've implemented a lot of it just with almost like narrative-based cartoons. It's certainly simpler and quicker, but it really just gets people in the mindset, right, of being immersed in a scenario and having to make some decisions or think about everything they click on. And so it's been really a fun trip for the last 3 years or so since created that. I remember just before that, you and I, Tom, were trying to come up with what can we do, that would be, innovative, that we could create some weird or high traction kind of project. And it would have been a lot of fun to do something more like the Honey Stick project, right? It was sort of a bit of a novelty. I remember after one of the first ones that I did with Symantec in 2011. I think McAfee, somebody from McAfee's PR company, the competitors, reached out to me and said, "Oh, we thought that stunt you did with Symantec was really cool." I'm going, "A stunt? You're calling this a stunt?"
Stunt hacking.
Anyway, but I mean, those things are good, like I said, for icebreakers and getting people's attention. But what I really wanted to do, and it's something I learned from the days of consulting in the government, which is having a risk mindset where it's important not only to think about compliance. You need to have multi-factor, you need to have strong passwords and all those things, right? But from a risk management point of view, you want more data about where the safeguards are effective or where you've put more capacity in for security. And there was really no assurance in the security awareness side. You could get people to do the static content, you could get them to do the quizzes, but how much does that really tell you about what they know about facing a threat in real life, right? And so it was really that challenge that I think has driven what we're doing right now to make it a more a higher assurance kind of an environment, and just something that nobody else has really focused on before.
Yeah. So looking back at your career, what was the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome?
I think the fact that security itself, even in the industry, we have a lot of different opinions, right? And so you can, for example, my passion for security awareness, I find a lot of people that will agree and say, you know what, it's pretty amazing when you talk to people and they don't realize certain things that we just take for granted as InfoSec or cyber professionals, right? But there are others who say, well, the end users should never have to worry about what they click on, right? We should be better at the technology side. Well, that is never actually going to happen. Sorry. Even some of the smartest minds, in information security, I'm amazed that they believe that we're ever going to get to a point where everything can be automatically secure. And so that to me is one of the bigger challenges, just convincing people of what's really needed to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we could ever take out the human element. No matter how much technology and automation that we have, there will always be humans involved at some point.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things for anyone who wants to go into the security world, you probably have visions of working on cool technologies, and that's great. But you have to have an appreciation of what we call the security triad, which is the people, the processes, and the technology. Not the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, but people, processes, and technology. If you don't, if one of those things is weak, it doesn't matter how strong the rest of your technology stack is, right? And so that's really where we have still the biggest challenge.
Yeah, completely agree. So what advice would you give someone that's just thinking about getting into cybersecurity, or maybe they're in college right now and they're thinking about taking some classes? Like, what would be your advice to someone like that?
Yeah, I think it partly depends on your personality, right? Because you can think that the technology is cool, but it may not be something that you naturally, absorb and can do well. But that doesn't mean you can't do well in cybersecurity. So, I mean, there's a place for all kinds of personalities in cybersecurity because there's so many different areas that have to be covered. And one of the things that I don't know if you recall, but a month or so ago, I did a webinar on becoming a cybersecurity champion. And it was actually meant for anyone who just has an interest in cybersecurity, not necessarily people who want to become a security expert. But if you do want to become a security expert, it's still a good way to do it. And I covered sort of 4 different areas that I think are important. One of them being collecting stories, right? So you read the news. I mean, there's no shortage of stories now. When I started, in 2007, 2008, just, trying to blog and stuff, I was looking for stories about breaches and stuff like that. And sometimes it was hard.
Oh yeah.
But by 2009, 2010, there was a breach in credit cards every week, and you and I were counting, here's a record setting security breach of 150 million users, right? So collecting those stories are important. And along with that, and once you've got that sort of little inventory of stories, you can actually use a risk management methodology just a bit in your mind easily to say, do I have what I need in those stories to teach people something or to learn something? And so those things are the assets, the types of assets or asset values that are at risk, the threats or types of threats that are potentially trying to get at the assets, and then what are the vulnerabilities or the safeguards that are trying to protect the threat or the assets from the threats. And if you have those 3 things in any story, you can easily teach yourself or others, about what was important, what should have been done better to try and protect things. And you can use that kind of method of collecting those stories and using the risk management methodology to just build your own library or inventory of skills and things that you can provide as advice. And then you can take that either out into the world and collaborate with people on Twitter or on LinkedIn or in other forums, conferences, just to, learn yourself, but also to spread, what you've learned. And then one of the most important things, if you have sort of a corporate ambition, you want to become more of an engine for security in your business, then you take all of that stuff and you start volunteering to be parts of committees or to help the security team or, even to move into a security role. But you don't have to be in a security role to leverage all of those stories and risk management methodology. You could do lunch and learns. You could do all kinds of things that if you're creative enough and you can suggest and work with the security management, they will certainly support you even if they don't have time to tell you what to do, right? So it does take initiative. That's why I say it depends a bit on your personality. If you really just wanted to learn about pen testing, or crypto or something like that, you can read books, you can take courses online, and again, do the forums, do the conferences, learn as much as you can. And even having the stories in each of those little areas will eventually make you a respected source of information, right?
Yeah, that's great advice. That mirrors a lot of things that I did early on in my career of blogging as an example.
Yep.
I wanted to research a particular topic, so I just started blogging about it. And that helped me learn about what I was blogging about or a particular technology or an attack or something like that, because I wanted to be a pen tester. And that also helped me get involved with the community as well.
Yep.
So I had people that were commenting on my blog, or I would go to conferences and people would say, "Oh, you're that guy that's writing that blog." And, that helped me network with people. And then through that, I was making connections. And really, that's kind of how I met you and I met Kevin, was all through those connections of just doing my own research and then talking with people.
Yeah. And there are a couple of interesting things. One of them is, as you create the blog articles, blogging is really kind of what I've told a lot of people to start doing, just because it helps you encapsulate your knowledge, right? And you look back after a year, and if you've done weekly blogging, you got 50 stories that you've written about, right? And that stuff you can reference on your resume. If you're looking to get a job in the area, and you're blogging about, the area that you want to be in. Now, the downside or the thing you got to be careful is you got to be careful what you publish, in terms of how you're going to be perceived, right? You have to be professional.
Yes.
at least some of us do. I'm not sure what Kevin thinks, but just kidding.
Kevin will do his own thing.
Kevin will do his own thing, and he cares a little less, about what people think about him. I'm CEO of a company, so I have to kind of take I've got investors, and so it definitely takes some attention to your audience, and say, what am I going to want to do with my career in the future? Will what I'm writing about right now reflect, positively on what I want to do?
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and no dig against Kevin at all. I mean, Kevin is definitely professional. He is professionally evil,
absolutely.
as he says. But there is something to be said about just keeping a professional demeanor, especially on Twitter and social media. It's just important, I think, just from a reputation standpoint.
If your goal is to be able to call somebody a jackhole on a podcast, then you have to earn a lot of trust and
you do
a reputation, right? Before people will say, that's just. But no, it is communication is a big part of it. I think one of the things that I talked about in the webinar that I did on this was it's depending on what you want to do with your career, you can sort of stay confined into a technology area, but I wouldn't recommend that, because technology changes, right? And the world changes, and you might have been, an exceptional expert at a certain thing, but all of a sudden something replaces it and you're not an expert at anything anymore. So.
Exactly. And there is so much opportunity out there now. I'd say more so than when we were getting started. Because information security really wasn't even a thing, really. We've seen it evolve over the last, 20 some years, but now there's just so much opportunity for, like you said, find courses and reading books and all that. There's so much content that's available for free. That's out there, more than I've ever seen in my entire career.
And it can be a little overwhelming when you say, where do I start? Right. But, start with, listening to podcasts, or, even the ones like Darkside or Darknet Diaries, or they're just really interesting stories. But you can hear all kinds of different stories in there, and all of a sudden realize, hey, that's really cool. I really like social engineering, or I really like, somebody doing, sniffing of packets and things like that. Right. So expose yourself to a lot of different stories and figure out which ones, you think will not only resonate with you, but will help you, if you were an expert in this stuff, would it sustain a career kind of thing, if that's what you want to do.
Awesome. Well, this is all great advice. I love hearing your story. I've known bits and pieces throughout the years, but it was good to finally hear the full Scott Wright career story. So it's been awesome. Like I said, not a straight line, and I don't think you can ever expect it to be, or it wouldn't be that much fun if it was. So. Yeah, you ask anybody really in our career, I don't think anyone really had a perfect line, so to speak, of how they got to where they're at in their career. Yeah. So cool. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to share. And if anybody has questions, definitely they can reach out. Excellent. All right, all. Well, thanks again for listening, everyone, and we will talk to you all next week. That's all for this week's show. Visit our website, sharedsecurity.net, for all previous episodes and to sign up for our email newsletter. Looking for Shared Security merch? Be sure to check out our online store at store.sharedsecurity.net. Don't forget, you can always find us on Twitter at SharedSec, and please hit that like and subscribe button below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week for another episode of the Shared Security Show.